Good evening, everyone. I think it's 7:30 at this point, so it might be an opportunity to begin our webinar tonight on nutrition and chronic inflammatory illness. We'll get started in about a minute or so. I'll walk through a little bit of an introductory presentation on the CSA and then turn it over to our panelists who you've come here to see. So we'll get going in about a minute or so, and then get the show on the road. So, Anin, and good evening, everyone. My name is Graham Reid. I am the current interim president for the Canadian Spondylitis Association, and we're so excited tonight to partner with some experts in the field, but also some patients living with spondyloarthritic conditions similar to myself, who lives with, I live with both ankylosing spondylitis and Crohn's. And have been involved in this game for at least 5 years now, since I was originally diagnosed in 2015, and then ended up getting on some solid treatment on 2016, and since then have been able to adapt to my new normal. I have the opportunity today to do a few things. First is just a little bit of housekeeping. We'd ask that while you're not speaking, it would be wonderful just to keep your microphone on mute so that we don't have any background noise. I know that this is a bizarre time for everybody, but we'll try to take full advantage of the hour and a bit that we have with our two experts. Also, we do have a question and answer process in the bottom of your screen next to the button that says share. There's a segment that says Q&A, and we'll ask you to type in your questions there, and we can look to moderate those throughout the presentation. So with that, I'll go through a quick presentation and then turn it over to those who you've come here to see. So just want to provide a little bit of a shout out to our esteemed partners who help support the activities of the CSA, as well as webinars such as this. So you have on your screen a number of our different supporters. We, as I mentioned today, would like to do three things: provide an overview of the CSA, offer the bulk of the time for presentations, and then have some time also for some Q&As. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to provide a little bit of an overview of the CSA. So the CSA is the National Association with the sole purpose to support those diagnosed with spondyloarthritic disease, inclusive of psoriatic arthritis all the way to ankylosing spondylitis, and many others as well. We're a not-for-profit corporation. Our board is currently made up of 7 members, all of them who live with spondyloarthritis, which offers an important patient-centric perspective for our organization. We have a wonderful executive director, Wendy, who many of you have likely interacted with, and she's on the line as well and will help support any specific questions about the CSA. And then we do have international partners as well. So the mission for the CSA has been in evolution over the last several months, and we've looked to provide an updated mission, vision, values, as well as some strategic pillars, and we're looking to get that internal process out to the public sometime soon. But in the interim, our mandate and our mission is to be the leading voice for the spinal arthritis community in Canada, providing support, education, awareness, and advocacy for patients, caregivers, and loved ones and healthcare professionals. We focus on four things: education and information, things like this opportunity now to bring you details on nutrition. We all know the importance of non-pharmacological treatment, diet, exercise, meditation that many of us use to live within our new normal. We do advocacy for our constituencies around health issues that those living with spinal arthritis face. We build awareness just so that folks understand what are these conditions, what are the realities that those living with it face, and how can workplaces, caregivers, and others understand the reality of living with chronic pain and chronic illness. And then we also provide support. And one of the good examples of support is our support groups. Since I've been involved, we've gone from 2 to 13 with a wide number of different places and different spaces depending on what that community wants to organize. In Ottawa, we have one. When I started about 3 years ago, we had about 5 people involved. We now have an email list of about 25 with anywhere from 8 to 10 who show up, which is an important space to create for those who live with similar conditions, just to share what that reality is. And it's a very different conversation with somebody who shares that condition with you than it is, say, a loved one who is trying to understand and not trying to take away from those loved ones, but trying to express a solidarity amongst those living with spinal arthritis. We're working to move for both peer-to-peer, telephone, and virtual, especially now, noting the reality that many folks are living with and facing the coronavirus and the disproportionate risk for those who are particularly on immunosuppressants and other related immunocompromised medication, or are just in the older age demographic. And one example of the resources that we have been developing and that you can find on the website right now, and that website is spinalitis.ca, which we've developed a variety of different information and recommendations in consultation with our medical advisors, including just some basic background with what is COVID-19, how does it affect people specifically with inflammatory autoimmune disease, some recommendations for SPA patients, some conversations about potential process to vaccines, but noting that I think our central recommendation is to consult with your doctor first. We also have a long list of other information if you're interested in, recognizing that it's quite topical for the situation that many of us are facing right now in this time of physical distancing. So both Wendy and I are here ready to respond to any questions or comments, and both of our emails are there if you'd like to follow up on any of the information that we shared and any of the work that we do at the CSA. And so with that, I'd love to turn it over, and I think Dan is going to help us do that, but I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Samantha and Audrey, our two panelists that will share about nutrition and inflammatory disease and how to live well with their new normal. Samantha is a registered dietitian in Northwest Ontario who lives with psoriatic arthritis. And Audrey is a public health nutritionist and instructor in Northern Saskatchewan, living with ankylosing spondylitis like me. And we're very blessed to have this opportunity to share with both of them. And I'd like to cede the floor to them. So miigwech for all of you to be here, and looking forward to hearing from Samantha and Audrey.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. I think we had a little technical difficulty there. We're working through it. Hopefully we're on the right page now. So I'm Audrey. Welcome, everyone. It's so exciting to see everybody here. And I just want to double check. Now, can everybody see? Can you see the nutrition and spondyloarthritis main slide? Can someone send me a message if you can?
Audrey, I'm happy to run it through if that helps. Can you see it now?
I can see now. Yeah, I'm just looking for, okay, here. If you stop sharing your screen, then I should be able to share mine, if we want to try that. Okay, how's that? Better now? Everybody see the proper slides? We're talking about nutrition and spondyloarthritis today. Okay, I see lots of people saying yes. Okay, sorry about that, guys. We're gonna get going here. I know there's lots of people on and everybody's busy with lots in their lives. So thanks for joining. I appreciate everybody's taking the time to spend this little bit of time with us to go over this, well, of course, Sam and I consider a very important discussion about nutrition. Obviously, our jobs revolve around this, but it's exciting to see that so many people are interested in this topic as well. As Graham mentioned, both of us live with these conditions as well, so it's very near and dear to our hearts. The other thing that's very exciting for us is we're just under the wire here today that we're able to offer this during Nutrition Month. March every year is Nutrition Month in Canada, and Dietitians of Canada choose a theme each year. This year it's it's called More Than Food, and this whole discussion is about talking about some of our food choices and how we make our food choices and are based on a large variety of other things just in the type of nutrition that foods offer. So that's a whole other discussion, but if anyone's interested in learning more, you can take a look at nutritionmonth2020.ca. And so what we are going to talk about today, these are objectives you can see listed on the screen today. You can, like Graham mentioned, also put in questions in the chat box, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can. So feel free to enter as we go. So we're basically here today to try to give people living with these conditions a better leg up on where to go to try to find appropriate information and some general tips on how to improve our health when we live with these conditions. So there's lots of different things that are out there. If you Google spondyloarthritis, you'll find all sorts, or you'll find a variety of topics. You might find a variety of people trying to sell you different supplements and different things that are supposedly are meant to cure you. So we really want to, if you take nothing away from today, we want to reiterate where to find credible information. Think of people's bottom lines when you're seeing something that's sold to you. So where do we turn to, or who do we turn to find credible information? Well, hopefully in your areas, Sam lives in Northwestern Ontario, I live in Northern Saskatchewan, but there's a variety of registered dietitians across Canada. And that can be kind of confusing, as even my job is publicized as a public health nutritionist, but I am a registered dietitian by trade. So the term registered dietitian is a protected term across Canada. So if you're talking with a dietitian, just make sure that they are actually a registered dietitian or an RD, compared to things like terms like nutritionist or registered nutritionist. Each province and territory is different in what is regulated. So just make sure to check that out if you're talking to someone with a nutrition background. You have people like your pharmacists, your doctors, your NPs, your specialists like your rheumatologists. Those are all going to be people on your side. And then there are movement people like our physiotherapists, kinesiologists, and our OTs as well. As far as organizations you can go to look for credible information, of course, we have information in Health Canada and the CSA, so our Canadian Spondylitis Association, which if you're not already a member of, we highly encourage everybody to become one. It's a great source for localized information specific to our spondylitis. There is a lot of unknowns at this moment about spondylitis, so we're learning each day when there's new research that can support all of us in how we live. Dietitians of Canada is a good one as well. The public site for Dietitians of Canada is called unlockfood.ca. You'll see that little apple down on the right-hand side there. And if you're looking for recipes and some other tips and articles about nutrition, that's going to be your best bet to go to. So if you go to unlockfood.ca, other reputable places, if you're living with other conditions at the same time as your spondyloarthritis, things like if you have heart disease or diabetes, we've got the Heart and Stroke Foundation, Diabetes Foundation, Diabetes Canada, and just making that cognizant choice of where you're getting your information from, because there's all sorts of stuff that can be out there on Google, and we just want to make sure we're getting the best evidence. Even one single article isn't going to change our practice. We know science is based on repeating outcomes over and over again, so we want to make sure we're telling people the best known evidence out that we have at any given time. They're living with ankylosing spondylitis or with any kind of spondylitis condition can sometimes be a little bit counterintuitive. And I went through this too. I did my token 8 years of waiting for my diagnosis, and it was confusing. You have joint pain and you might lie down to try to avoid the pain, but then that actually ended up in a worse condition. We get sore from inactivity, we get in more pain. And now we know that especially once we're diagnosed, we know that activity is good for us and good for our joint pain. And so there's going to always be a fine line or a threshold of what is good for your body compared to somebody else's. So it's really important for all of us to take that into consideration, that some are going to be able to do more and some are doing less than others when it comes to physical activity. So with that situation, we can sometimes get into these negative spiral situations. It's kind of like when you're unable to sleep or you have a bad sleep at night and you wake up and you're feeling in pain or you're tired and you think, oh, I need a cup of coffee to keep going. Drink coffee throughout the day and then end up having a rough sleep again that night. So you can see how that continuously puts us in that negative spiral. And when we're in that situation, we don't feel great. And that's really tough when if you're working, if you're a parent, or if you're in constant pain all day, you're not going to feel like standing in the kitchen and chopping vegetables and preparing meals from scratch. And that's where we turn to the things like the easier, convenient foods. And then we don't feel very good. We're kind of tired from that and end up in more pain. So pre-COVID days, we're in the same boat. We've got 3 busy kids that are in a variety of activities. So if we didn't have a good plan of what we were going to feed them for supper, if we have our family for supper each night, then you can see how easy it is to revert to those easy, convenient foods, especially if you're suffering in any kind of pain. Now, the positive thing is that we can try to halt or reverse those negative spirals and turn them into more of a positive situation and try to convert what's going on inside our bodies. And so this is where it's really important to start with the basics of understanding what's going on in our bodies. So hopefully everybody has a basic understanding of what inflammation is and knowing that it's a natural and a necessary reaction in our bodies. Excuse me. It helps us heal from injuries. If you cut your finger while you're preparing something in the kitchen, it eventually gets kind of red and swollen, and that's a good thing. We want the inflammation to come and help send that little army in to try to protect the finger. It's helping fix that injury so we don't just have the cut stay open. So our inflammation helps us fight bacteria and viruses as well, helps just keep us healthy in general. Now, the way inflammation works in the body is by messengers, and there's messengers for pretty much everything that our body does, for hunger, for breathing, for heartbeat, all those different things. There's little messengers that go throughout our body to tell our brain what to do, and then the brain responds to send out whatever kind of army it needs. We've got 2 main messengers when it comes to inflammation. We've got our pro-inflammatory and our anti-inflammatory messengers. So the pro are the ones that send the inflammation, stimulate the inflammation in our body. So we've got that cut and you want some inflammation to happen to heal that injury, versus the anti-inflammatory, which comes along and says, okay, no, everything's good now, we can calm down, we don't need to be sending so much. The trouble we can get into in these autoimmune conditions like we have is that our messengers are a little bit off for whatever reason, and our body continues to see our own body as threats. So we have that constant pro-inflammatory situation taking place where we're in a state of almost constant inflammation. And so inflammation can't really sit still. It has to do one or the other. So in our conditions, when we are in a flare-up, we've got a lot of inflammation going on. So what can we do to say when we're talking about diet? Do we have any kind of support out there for us? And luckily we do. First thing I want to mention is, what is a diet and what does that mean when I say that word to you guys? And I'm sure everybody has a different connotation of what a diet means. For those of us like Samantha and I as dietitians, when we say diet, we mean a pattern or a style of eating. What most people think of when they hear the word diet, they think of something that's a pattern of eating maybe, but something that's really restrictive, and you're deprived of certain things in order to try to lose weight. And so when we talk about diet, we're talking about just the usual way of eating, and we hope people have that language of, we're trying to shift that language to say we all have some kind of a diet. It's just whether it's healthy or not is the main question. So the science is still pretty new on all of this, and that's contrary to what you'll see on Dr. Google out there. You'll see all sorts of things sold to you if you're willing to pay, claiming to cure all the inflammation in the body. But we do know that there are a variety of foods and a diet type of eating, or type of pattern, a diet that can actually help decrease inflammation in the body. And so there's never going to be just one specific thing. Before I had my diagnosis, I tried a variety of different things too. You can find all sorts of supplements sold of specific things, like curcumin which is the active component of turmeric, for example. So if you think you can eat, the picture here on the bottom, you have the inflammation food. So if you think you can, eat burgers and fries, but just take the curcumin pills to offset that inflammation, then that's not going to work in a very good balance throughout the body. When we stick to something for a long time and have consistency, that's when we're going to start seeing some results. So we see this all the time on New Year's resolutions, when people decide they're going to start the new year and be very fit and healthy. And research shows us it lasts until about January 17th. So it's not a very good length of time for us to be our best people from January 1st to the 17th. And oftentimes it's just because people are trying too hard. They're too intense on what they want to do. And so they're switching their diet patterns completely, and they're trying to exercise a couple hours a day, compared to what we usually say to people is try to just make small changes over a long period of time. And that's going to be something that's more sustainable for all of us. Because we do know that some foods do have anti-inflammatory properties. So when we eat in a pattern of including anti-inflammatory foods for a long period of time, then we're going to see that benefit in the body. And some foods, we know that some foods make us feel better than others. And it's consistency that's going to be the key to all of this. So is there an actual anti-inflammatory diet? There are a variety out there that you might have come across, but the one that we come back to over and over again is the Mediterranean diet. I'm sure everybody's seen pictures of or heard about it anyways. And the main thing, every year, and usually about December every year, we get some kind of article on the top diets of the year. And consistently over and over every year, Mediterranean diet always ends up near the top. And it's because it's scientifically proven. We see that people have been on this diet for years and they have better health indicators. And what that means is things like better blood pressure, better glucose, like blood sugar control, decreased heart disease risk, those sorts of things. And so when you look at this little picture here, you can see that just by looking at it, the foods that we promote the most of are down on the bottom there. So veggies and fruits, of course, but beans, nuts, and seeds are good. That we know that in Canada, most people in the world in Canada don't eat enough or don't eat very many of those things. And we also know that most people in Canada don't eat very many whole grains. In general, we promote more whole grains than not, and we say about make half your servings of grains whole. But yeah, trying to promote more whole grains is definitely something that Canadians can improve on. Fish as well is another big one that isn't necessarily a commonly consumed food. Depends on where you live. Here in northern Saskatchewan, we have a lot of people that live more traditional lifestyles, so we do eat a lot of fish. Different fish than what you would have out on the coast on either side of our country. But eating fish is a good thing, and we try to promote that as well. It has lots of healthy fats in it, which are good for a variety of different things in our bodies. Olive oil is another component of the Mediterranean diet that we promote. So, I mean, stereotypical dietitian, right? We promote salads and vegetables. When it comes back to that standard promotion, that things with more color are generally better for us. And when we add a little bit more of these, then we're going to see some benefit. Now, again, living in the north, we're very aware of the food security issues, and some of you from coast to coast might live in conditions or communities where food access is a bit of a problem, especially right now during this COVID situation, where things like fresh produce aren't going to be our main go-tos. And so other things like having frozen foods on hand are going to be a huge benefit for us. We know that when foods are frozen, they're frozen in their most nutritious state. So sometimes their frozen foods are even better for us than our fresh ones. So frozen are a really good option. Or the other option is using canned goods. The one thing that they have more of in them is the sodium. So if you have a canned item, say you're having peas or something, you can just strain them, rinse them with water, and you'll get rid of a lot of that sodium. So the bottom line there that we see is the biggest one, that's what we promote the most of. And as we go further up the little triangle here, you can see those are the types of foods that are still promoted, but not as much. So it's moderate in dairy, poultry, and eggs. And so if anyone's been following nutrition, you'll know that the latest Canada Food Guide does not have a picture of milk on it. We don't have a food group of milk anymore. And there's a lot of politics that have gone in over the years to creating our food guide. Us dietitians, we are still promoting milk to be consumed. It's still included. If you delve into the bit more of the different pages on the food guide, you'll see that it is still recommended in there. In the end, it is our best source of calcium and vitamin D, which are best friends. They have to go together. You need calcium and vitamin D in order for them to do their jobs in our body of strengthening our bones. Okay, so if you don't drink milk for a variety of reasons, some people are allergic, some people have lactose intolerance, which are two different things, and other people choose to not drink milk for religious or cultural reasons, or whatever your reason might be. So if you're in that kind of situation, the biggest thing to be aware of is just your source of calcium. Okay, so the Mediterranean diet still includes dairy, poultry, and eggs. It's just a little up further on the triangle to say that we should have them, but not as much as the things below them. One idea some dietitians would like to promote is having a snacking plate. If you're not in the mood for even having a full meal, if you live by yourself, or if you have a bunch of picky eaters in your house, just make a big tray, put a bunch of different foods on a tray and from all the different food groups, and you'll be good to go. You're going to automatically get a variety of nutrients there. One thing that the Mediterranean diet is low in the promotion, as you go further up, you see the red meats and the sweets. So they are still included in the Mediterranean diet. It's not that they're totally off limits. Things like wine and sweets and the processed meats are definitely something that are still included in most people's day-to-day life, but as long as we keep them in the more moderate or the low amounts, then that's what we promote. In Canada, we know that the #1 other food, so something that doesn't qualify in any of the regular food groups or food categories, the #1 other food consumed by Canadians is deli meats. So we know, but just automatically that if people are consuming a lot of deli meats, that they're getting a lot of extra sodium in their diets. Sodium, of course, is linked to hypertension or heart issues, so we want to try to limit that as much as possible and keep it at a decent amount. So what I usually tell my folks is that the more something looks like what it started as, it's probably better for you. You know, when you look at deli meats when they're in a little round ball, and I always tease the kids that when I'm in the school saying, you know, do you see chickens running around in a little tiny ball, or our cows out in the pasture? Which part did we cut off to make that little ball that's formed so well in the deli section? So eating little bits of those pieces at the top, of those different types of food at the top of this triangle, are still part of your day-to-day diet. And that's a big component of your diet overall, is just finding something that works for you. If you're a big lover of steak, then a vegan diet is not going to be right for you, and that's okay. If you are mostly like vegetarian options, then but like to have a little bit of red meat out every now and again, then that's okay too. And if you completely don't eat meat, if you are vegan or a type of vegetarian, then that's okay too. It's just paying attention to the different types of nutrients that you get from each of those types of diets or types of foods, and being aware of those so that you can figure out what you're missing if you're going to cut something out of your diet. So salads are always a nice way we can start with to add color and different types of vegetables and nutrients to our plates. We always say things like having more color on your plate is a good thing, and that's because we know that the little tiny nutrients that are in foods often are associated with color. So the more color you have, the better. But sometimes when people decide, okay, I'm going to go vegetarian, but they don't think of the ways that they're going to incorporate protein into their diet when they've decided to cut out meat. So this is an opportunity where you can play up your salads, making them colorful, but also try different types of protein sources to include right in your salad. We get a lot of questions about supplements and people wondering about whether they should be consuming them or not. And overall, if you're consuming a well-balanced diet, then no, we don't recommend you wouldn't need a supplement. The only nutrient that's not consistent for is vitamin D. So once you're over 50, you should be taking a vitamin D supplement. Pretty much anywhere in Canada, we don't have strong enough sun here in a long enough period of time to get our vitamin D from our sun here. So in general, if you're eating a well-balanced diet, you don't need a supplement. If you do want to take one, you should talk to your dietitian. Doctors, depending who you talk to, some have more nutrition background or training than others. So, but if there's a specific reason, if you've had some kind of blood test that proves that you're low in something, then that's something to talk about. But otherwise, don't start taking individual nutrients supplements without consulting anyone. There is a potential for taking too much, and that's going to actually cause harm. We have a little window of opportunity where if we eat too little of something, then that's bad for us. And then there's this range that's good for us. But then we eventually come to a threshold in our bodies where if we consume more than that, then that's actually going to cause harm as well. So we want to keep within that realm of doing good to our bodies. Probiotics is something you've probably heard of, as well as the gut microbiome. It's kind of a hot topic. These are both hot topics these days. And the biggest thing about probiotics is you need to know why you're taking it and which specific one. So there are a variety of different types, different strains of probiotics out there on the market these days. And if you're just taking a general probiotic and you aren't even sure which strain it is, then it's probably not doing any good for your body. We do know probiotics are living organisms, so when we consume them, it has to be linked to the purpose of why we need to take it. There are some strains that have been proven to help with irritable bowel, so if people have IBS or IBD, then there are some that are proven to be helpful with that. Currently, we don't have any that are linked specifically to us, those of us with spondylitis. And if you're interested, if you're wondering if probiotics are good for you or not, we do have this chart in Canada. On the left-hand side of your screen there, you'll see probioticchart.ca. It's not the most user-friendly resource to use, but down at the bottom of this page, that's where you can enter what condition you're trying to look for. And if there's a probiotic that's proven to have some benefit to that condition, then it'll pop up, it'll show you those exact probiotics. So definitely ask about those. And these ones too, there's been some studies done of, because they're live organisms, these ones, the best before date actually comes into consideration. Oftentimes the best before date is just that. It doesn't mean it expires after that date, but it's just best before that specific time. Probiotics, they can expire because they are live microorganisms. So if you've bought something a year ago and you've got, a great big Costco purchase or something, and it's past the best before date, then they're probably not doing any good for you as well. So, okay, so all that stuff, what do we actually want to do now? Back to making those small changes. So trying to really think of what is actually realistic in your lifestyle. If you've got family, if you have kids, if you're working, this whole COVID situation has everybody in a totally different situation than normal. Maybe you're home more often than not, hopefully more often than not. So this might be a good opportunity. I've seen lots of different posts lately about trying out different recipes now that people are at home. So just trying to think of what sorts of things do you like? Take a look at the Mediterranean diet and pick out some things that you like from those lists and figure out how you can start incorporating those into your daily routine. I can't stress enough how important it is to plan. If you don't have a plan, then you're probably not going to make good choices. Now, how many times are we in the kitchen and we've come home from a day of work, or we've been busy and we're in between events and things that we have to go from one to the next, and we just grab whatever's closest, whatever's easiest, and we know it's maybe not the best option nutrition-wise for us, but it's way easier to just grab something and run with it versus take the time to cut something up, especially if we're struggling in pain as well. So building up those small changes or making one small change at a time. Things like condiments can make a huge difference. There's lots of people who see big differences when they start just looking at all the different choices that we make throughout the day. So an idea even for things like making your own salad dressings, if you mainly put a little bit more olive oil than vinegar in, you can use that as your starting point. And you can just leave it at that, or you could also add in extra herbs and spices and as you like, whatever kind of things that you like. You've seen the new Canada Food Guide, or latest Canada Food Guide that came out last year. It's something that us dietitians have been promoting for actually quite a few years, and we call it the plate method. And so you don't have to see that that's what's on the right-hand side there, where you see the picture of the different foods. And it's not saying that every meal needs to look exactly like this. It's more of a concept. So if you think of all the different choices you make throughout the day, would they add up to be about that? Would they add up to be about half your plate being vegetables and fruit? Would you have a quarter of your choices being whole grains and a quarter of your choices being a good protein choice? One big thing I was happy to see in the new food guide is we got juice off the food guide, and we have water there in its place. There is the argument for milk, of course, and we do still promote milk. But the biggest thing, one of the biggest things that I see over and over again, unfortunately, is us in Northern Saskatchewan anyways, we have some of the worst stats on early childhood dental disease. So we're constantly sending our kids down to the cities to get all their teeth pulled out. And it's a huge financial burden for all of Canada, really, when we start looking at all the different provinces that are making this, but also a variety of other traumatic things go along with that. And so for our health overall, that's just talking about teeth. But when we look at obesity and our numbers in that and how sugar affects us overall, the more we can get rid of or limit our added sugars, the better we're going to be, better off we're going to be, sorry. And that is a big differentiation as well. When we talk about added versus natural sugars, we would never discourage someone from consuming an apple or an orange or a banana where we have something that's a little bit more naturally sweet. It's the added sugars, it's the juices and the pops and the sodas and other, Gatorades, those sorts of different types of drinks. Those are the ones that are wreaking havoc on us. So just in kind of a summary here, this is just another example of what that would look like if you're following the Mediterranean plate method. So you, again, having half your plate with the vegetables, a quarter of the plate with the grains, and also a bit of meat, especially if you can have, or a protein source, and especially consuming fish. So with that, we'll turn it over to you guys if people have questions. We did want to also highlight the Spondylitis Association website. So if you haven't been on it, this is what it looks like when you go on, and we encourage everyone to become a member of it. If you have questions after this, or not necessarily just about nutrition, but other things about the CSA, the email address is on the bottom there. So from there, I think we'll look at the chat to see if there are a variety of questions from people. And I don't know, Dan, can we have two people on at once? Is Samantha able to be unmuted to answer questions as well?
Absolutely. I've just unmuted Samantha as well. There are a few questions that have been asked throughout the presentation, so we could even get to those first. I'll post them to you, and then you could read them out and respond.
Sure. Okay, so that's in the question and answer one, right? Where we...
No, there have been some questions that have been asked through the chat. So
okay.
we could go through those too, because I think they're a little bit more related to what we've asked or what we've spoken about.
Okay. Sure, do you want me to take these on?
Yeah, I've just pasted it in our private chat now. So I gave you one just now.
Okay, sorry, let me just figure out how to use this here. Go into it.
Hi, it's Samantha here. I can read it out to you as well. So the question was, why did I develop burning mouth syndrome with AS?
Sorry, burning mouth syndrome?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that one, I don't know if I have an answer for that. Sam, do you have one answer?
Yeah, I was actually looking at that one earlier and trying to figure out if I had an answer to that, and I can't think of it right off the top of my head. I imagine it has something to do with the overall inflammation in the body, but the actual mechanism, I don't know.
So that might be something. I'm just writing some notes down as well. We can get back to people.
Yeah.
Okay, can you see other questions?
What about nightshade veggies?
Yeah, so there, and from Sam, you can jump in as well. I do know some people who this seems to be a thing for, that they do better without consuming nightshade veggies. We don't necessarily have a lot of research on that to support it, but I often say, you know, if something is working for you, then you can definitely run with that. Sam, do you have more to add?
Yeah, that's basically my opinion as well. It's, for most people, there's, you know, they have bigger fish to fry, to use that turn of phrase, where there's other things that we know that they are doing or not doing that would be more beneficial than starting to cut out vegetables. So wouldn't be the first place I would start, but for some people it does help.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just going to make a comment too. If there are questions that we can't answer here, we'll keep track of those and we'll turn them to the medical advisory group for the CSA as well, so we can get back to people. Okay. Sam, do you see another question?
Yeah. So there's a couple that are related that I've seen. One would be thoughts on intermittent fasting, and then another person asked about a low or no starch diet. And those are both very popular right now. So
yes, very. Yeah, and I know I've had some people ask me about the low starch, and there's articles over the years kind of talking about this. And the same thing with intermittent fasting is that, well, okay, no, sorry, first off, we'll start with the low starch, in that it too, it's like the nightshades, that we don't have a lot of scientific evidence to support this. And thinking about the practicality of it is something else to take into consideration when you're following any kind of diet pattern. So in that, it links into sorry, I'm reading all the questions at the same time here, no. It links to the intermittent fasting, so that if that fits within your lifestyle, maybe it's something that you can start with to try to get a handle on nutrition and how it impacts your body. But it's not something overall that we promote.
Yeah, for the low carb, low starch, keto, all of those very related things, it works for some people and really, really does not work for others. I know if I don't eat something carby at each meal, I just end up with heartburn and low energy and not very filled. So it depends to what your choices are, you know. Yeah.
Yep.
There are a lot of questions flying in, so we're just gonna have to answer as many as we can and keep track of the rest so that we can add them in a future webinar or articles on the website. So that would be fantastic.
Right. Right. Okay. Do you want to pick another one, Sam? Maybe I don't know. Yeah, just pick one and we can try and answer it.
All right, so one person going over to the Q&A box said, I struggle with IBS and gluten and dairy are my biggest triggers. So how do I navigate whole grains and dairy? IBS is actually something that I help people with fairly often in my work in the town I live in. And there are plenty of whole grains that are not gluten grains, so not wheat, rye, or barley. There's quinoa, there's, my brain is blanking right now, but there are a lot. So the Canadian Celiac Association is a good resource for those. And again, there's alternatives for dairy. So yeah, there's options there for sure.
Right. Okay, just take another one from here. There was one about talking about bioavailability of calcium. So recommending milk over broccoli for calcium, and yes, for sure, there is a bit of calcium in broccoli, but not enough to support our daily requirement for calcium. Yeah.
Yeah. 1 cup of milk has 300 milligrams of calcium versus, I think one cup of broccoli has 75, if my memory serves. So yes, it's pretty good, seeing as most things have way less, but other options would be like a tablespoon of molasses has 150. So.
And if you consider our daily requirements, most of us are about 1,000 milligrams that we would need. So yeah, broccoli is an okay source, but you need to consume a lot of it to match what milk offers. Yep. So I see another one on thoughts on eliminating gluten as an inflammatory food. So similar concept, and actually this one, there was a question about linking to people who've maybe had eating disorders in the past and eliminating things and how that can be a trigger. For sure, we don't want to start taking things out unless we know for sure what the problem is. Sometimes we don't know the problem, and an elimination diet, it can be a starting point for that, but we can start adding things back in. So as far as gluten goes, it's not a blanket statement for all of us to think that gluten is a trigger to inflammation. But if we do say you've got history of celiac disease in your family, then that would be a reasonable place to start for sure. And diet pop counting, does diet pop count towards added sugar? No, diet pop doesn't have sugar in it. It doesn't have anything good in it for us though either. We do know that it still has the acid that attacks our teeth. So it doesn't have the sugar, but it has the acid component as well. And there are some conflicting research studies out there about what diet pops do to our bodies and can sometimes trigger our hunger response in our body. So we end up actually being more hungry after we've consumed a diet pop. If you're a big pop drinker and you're looking at ways to start weaning yourself off it, then I wouldn't discourage you from trying that. If you're switching to try to have a more healthy diet, I wouldn't expect someone who drinks, and we have lots of different pop issues in the north here. So I know that some people will drink 15 cans of pop a day. You know, if we're trying to get someone to cut back on that, then switching a couple of those to a diet pop to wean themselves off would be okay. But if you're consuming pop just a little bit, then we would recommend having having water and on the market these days. That's one benefit of living in this day and age, that you have a variety of options. Sam, you want to take another one?
Yes. One person asked about what other oils are recommended other than olive oil. Olive oil is the one that's most associated with the Mediterranean diet because that's where olive trees come from. Canola oil has a very similar profile. And
those are the two main ones.
Those are the two main ones. There are other ones, but they're a lot harder to come by, especially when you live in a small town. So those are the two most recommended ones.
Yep. Another question about consuming meat during the day rather than night. I would turn that into all foods. So once we consume something, it triggers our digestion response, our digestive action in the body. So that's why you probably heard different things about not eating close to bedtime, because it sparks the digestion. So it kind of your body is waking up after you eat. So it is better to eat further away from bedtime. If you can keep your evening snacking to a couple hours before you go to bed, then that's best. I'm wondering if you're asking about meat specifically because it's a little bit harder to break down in the body. Carbs are our easiest things to break down, and then meat and fat are harder for us to break down, so they take longer to break down, which is again why we we promote the plate method style of eating, so that you're eating of all the different food groups together, or types of food, the nutrients together, so that they break down at different points throughout the day after you've consumed those. And so to answer that specifically, it doesn't really matter when you consume your meat during the day, but using the day to use up the energy that we put into our bodies, the earlier kind of the better. So you probably don't want to have a big meal right before bed.
That is perfect. Another question here is wanting some clarification about inflammation. This says, when you mentioned pro-inflammatory, it sounded like inflammation was a healer of the body versus being something that destroys based on the tissue type, the HLA. So inflammation is part of healing. It's required to heal, to help your body take care of invaders, the bacteria that cause illness or viruses that cause illness, and it helps you heal from cuts. So it is required. It is good in that way. The problem comes when it's active when we don't need it to be, when there isn't a foreign body, a foreign virus or bacteria attacking us, or a cut that needs to be healed. That's where inflammation becomes not helpful.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so another one about coconut oil versus olive oil. Yes, absolutely. It seems to be all the rage. That was a good point. It came onto the markets full force a little while ago, and I remember my first question about it, and then someone in a health food store had promoted it to a friend of mine, and she said, "What about this? You know, I just bought this because they said it's the best stuff." And I said, "Well, I don't get it, because coconut oil is a saturated fat, and and then I had to go research saying, am I missing something? But no, it is true. It's a different type of oil that it can be consumed, but I guess the concept is just being aware of the fact that it is a saturated fat. And we know that saturated fats are worse for our body than unsaturated fats. So anything that's liquid at room temperature, any kind of oil or a fat that's liquid at room temperature would be more likely to be an unsaturated fat. So our canola oils or olive oils, when they're sitting in the room, they are in a liquid state, versus things like coconut oil and butter, they are still solid at room temperature, and those are our saturated fats. So I would still promote olive and canola oil over coconut oil. Okay, we had a question about how often to eat chicken if you're following a Mediterranean diet. There's no hard and fast rule about what's considered less often and more often, but in general, if you're looking at the triangle style of eating, I would say once a week would be okay.
There's a question here about what is a whole grain. So the easiest way to describe it is to think of a diagram with the grain. So grains are things that turn into seeds for the most part. You have the starchy part. You've got the germ, which would germinate. So wheat germ is one that is sold separately. And then there's the bran that wraps around it and sort of protects it. A whole grain has all three of those. A refined grain has the bran and the germ stripped away. So you just have the starchy part in the middle. So it's incomplete is the problem, and more processed, which typically then they'll add other things that are unnecessary for us. Similarly, someone had asked about trying to clarify their question, that they weren't asking about low or no carbs, but they were asking about low or no starch diets. They're the same thing, because carbohydrates are starches and sugars and fiber. So a low starch diet would be low carb, because you're removing the majority of the carbs.
Right, thanks for that. I'm just looking at our time now, and we still have a big list of questions. So I feel like Sam and I have a bit of work to do. We'll go through the list of questions, and we can get some answers out to everybody. We'll figure out a way with this Monolith Association group here. We'll through social media, the website, and maybe a potential second webinar if that's required. But right now, I think I'll say thank you and turn it back over to Graham.
Oh, whoops. You're great. So thank you, Audrey and Samantha. It's tough to have like a virtual clap, but we really appreciate the insight that you've brought. And we look forward to working with you to respond to all of these excellent questions. Clearly, as for all of us, these are things that we attempt to navigate as we explore our well-being and our nexus of well-being. So we really appreciate the time both of you have taken, and we'll look to respond to the plethora of questions, and it seems like there's a lot of interest, so we'll explore also the opportunity to plan another one as needed. It's 8:30 now, and we respect your time, and so want to appreciate the over 100 people who have participated. We hope that you've enjoyed both presentations as well as the questions and answers, and we will be putting this up on our website, including the slides. So check those out, and then we'll be coming back to you on April 6th. With a webinar exploring inflammatory conditions and COVID-19. So something that, again, is quite topical. So with that, want to appreciate all of you for sticking with us tonight, and look forward to the next opportunity that we get to sit here in our virtual circle with one another. So thank you, and have a wonderful evening, and stay safe.